Okay, SWS was founded or incorporated in 1964. And there was a pre-meeting before that. It was an organizational meeting, and it was held at in our Crozier Tech High School in downtown Dallas on Ross Avenue. And it just so happens that was the year that I started Crozier Tech as a freshman. So she was downstairs meeting, and I was upstairs getting jumped on by the teacher. So originally it was called North Texas Watercolor Society, right, Naomi?
Right.
And then in September the 2nd, 1966, the certificate of amendment was issued to be called Southwestern Watercolor Society. So that was when the name started.
We just outgrew in North Texas almost immediately. We could see that it was getting beyond just North Texas almost immediately. Of course, South Texas had watercolor societies already in place, but they were not encompassing everybody. So this was by changing our name, we were able to count anybody. We had people join us from up east, watercolors were strong watercolors who came into our watercolor society from the east after we named it Southwestern.
In 1964 was the first board of directors and first organization, and the president was Reese Kennedy, and the vice president was Naomi. So Naomi was the very first vice president in the society.
And I was in charge of membership at that time. Later it was changed to programs, I believe. Isn't that what it is now?
Yes.
Vice president is program chairman.
Yes.
But at that time, vice president was just, we were after members, we just wanted to bring them in. And I was in charge of keeping up with that. And I have to tell you a little something. I had to do it on an old-fashioned typewriter and with duplicate paper, Every time I got a new name, I had to redo the whole list because I wanted them in alphabetical order. So I had to redo the whole thing with, the onion skin paper so that I could make copies for the president and secretary to have too. So it was quite a job.
So talk to us about Ed Whitney and how he was instrumental in helping start SWS.
Well, actually, to me, he was the beginning of SWS. Of course, we didn't know it at the time, but he came to Dallas at my invitation to do a program for Artists and Craftsmen Association. And Artists and Craftsmen was having a sidewalk sale in Highland Park Village. And they had him do a demonstration one night, and people were just so excited about him. He took a booth in that sidewalk show too. There was 3 nights in a row. And he did a demonstration one night there on the sidewalk. And then his demonstration in an auditorium was very formal and more of a lecture. He was excited about his reception here, and he decided to come back the next spring to get out of New York. He was trying to escape the cold in New York, and he and his wife drove down to Texas for many, many years. But after about the 3rd year that he came that way, he would come for 3 weeks, and we'd have a class or 2 during the week, and then we'd have weekend classes too, so that working folks could attend. And of course, those classes filled up real good. met, if you remember, the corner of Oak Lawn and the I-35. That, what is that called right in there? It has a special name, but I can't think of the name of it. But we met under the freeway there and made a caravan to whatever places I had picked out for them to have a class. And of course I had to find places where there was a restroom, or if it rained, we'd need to get under shelter. So it was quite a job to get those classes organized. Anyway, I'm getting much too long here. We saw that we could organize a club, felt like it would become a club. Reese Kennedy was teaching watercolor, Bud Biggs was teaching watercolor, and then the people that they were teaching were also coming to the Whitney workshops. So it looked like we could make a club out of this. And that's how we got started. Reese decided that he could call the group together and Crochet, and there were 50 people there that night. And we were so excited. The board was elected that evening, and that board started working immediately on bylaws for the club. See, there was nothing for us to go by, so we had to make up our own rules, and the bylaws have changed some during the time we've used them, because you naturally hone them by use. But it was pretty steady what we did in those early days. I think a lot of it is still hanging in there.
This is a photograph of Reese Kennedy with the glasses on. And this is his outdoor workshops. Talk to the group a little bit about this station wagon and coming in from New York on it. Talk about that.
Well, actually, the first time I went to a workshop, I lived in New York and saw in American Artist an ad that Whitney was taking groups to New England to paint 2 weeks, and he took you in his station wagon. So I joined that group, and I went 3 times. Twice while I lived in New York, and then when we moved back here, I flew up to New York and met them there, and we went in the station wagon. There were 9 of us in his station wagon. He had.
Is that whiskey on top of the station wagon?
This is later.
Oh, this is later.
The first, we had bottles of water on top.
That's what that is. There's bottles of water on top. Yeah.
Okay, well that was one of his marks of this is watercolor. We had bottles of water for our painting because we were at seashore, and salt water wouldn't work all that well. So we used fresh water for our watercolor. The way he managed was tying all of our luggage on top to get up there from New York. And he had our watercolor bags with our equipment in it lined up on the open tailgate. And if it rained,
I have a picture of Harwood K. Smith. You want to talk about the first exhibit with Harwood?
you know, Harwood K. Smith was one of the first members of SWS to go on a Whitney paid out when we first organized. I was just amazed that man was so important, but he loved watercolor, and you all know who he is, and who he was. He was outstanding architect.
Yeah, he started HKS Architects, probably the second largest architectural firm in the country, if not the world.
And big buildings downtown, his organization designed them. Anyway, he became the first show chairman. How he happened to accept that, I can't imagine, but he did. And I think it was sort of to keep a account of what we were worth as watercolors. He was afraid that we might not measure up to show in public, so he arranged to have the first show in a barn. And it was at what kind of ranch is that?
Dude Ranch.
Dude Ranch. Was it Wiley Dude Ranch? I'm not sure if that was the name of it. It seemed like that was the name of it. Anyway, it was just out of Dallas here somewhere. And we had, for prizes, Reese Kennedy made a nice little emblem. Each one was handmade, and the prizes were not cash, just this merit award. It was merit award. Mine is somewhere at home, but where I have no idea. But I've treasured that for many years, that Reese made it himself for each of us to have. And there must have been about 10 awards given. The judge was a man who taught architecture at A&M.
Also, you had a really neat story about the signature, the SWS signature, how it got started.
Well, SWS was the first organization to call that signing your initials after the organization's initials after your name, called it signature. Now, AWS was doing it, but they didn't call it that, and they didn't have quite the same setup that we do. But I think they now call it signature too. We needed a stimulation for the group to enter shows more. The entering of shows was just kind of nil, and in order to stimulate people to try to get in the shows, we asked them to at least get 5 acceptances, and then they could sign SWS after their name. Well, that did stimulate business. It did help, and we're still doing it. I've been a little bit disappointed that some other organizations have taken just free, you know. It should be a thing that people really have to work for. And so those of you who think you'll never make it, you'll make it, and you just have to stick with it. And you'll find that it's really rewarding for you to be a signature member.
Okay, anything else, Naomi? Okay, well, thanks a lot. We really appreciate it.